Today's episode is a very special one for me. You'll hear from two travelers who changed the course of my work and helped me shape the Italy travel consultation model that I offer. First, you'll meet Matt Littlejohn, and he was the very first person who reached out to me after hearing me speak on another Italy podcast about Cilento. And he asked, "Can I pay you for an hour of your time on Zoom?" Now, at that time, we were in the depths of the COVID lockdowns, and I was in New York City where I was just listening to ambulances go by 24 hours a day. So when I recorded that Cilento podcast episode, I had no idea if I would even have a business again on the other side of the pandemic. So the fact that this listener reached out to me in the first place was just lovely. And then the fact that he offered to pay me for my time was really moving and really helpful. And at that time, I didn't even have a service to offer. I was just organizing group tours and bespoke itineraries. But that conversation with Matt, which was full of curiosity and depth, it was the beginning of something that I would then offer people that I didn't even know that they wanted or needed, but that I could certainly deliver very, very well. Matt is still a follower of my work today, which is such an honor. And in our conversation, we revisit that very first chat, and then we talk about his recent trip to Naples, which turned out to be a huge revelation for him. And we talk about how thoughtful travel, meaning reading lots of books and watching movies before a trip, can really make it so much better. And then you'll hear from Caroline Raush. Now, she was one of my first clients after I formalized my offer. And together, we talk about her experience in Cilento, where my family is from, and how that region opened her eyes to a part of Italy that most travelers miss. But then we discuss a very powerful heritage trip that she took to Calabria. I had put her in touch with a researcher who was able to help her find her family roots. And it's during that journey that something very magical happened. And it's something I've seen happen before and I know can happen again and again. And it's the reason why whenever I'm talking to a client who has an Italian last name and they tell me they want to go to Tuscany, I say, yeah, sure, we can do that. But where is your family from? They're probably from Calabria or Sicily or Campania. And these are the kinds of magical experiences, if you're open to them, that are truly life-changing. Now, what connects both of these conversations and the reason that I'm even sharing them with you is that Matt and Caroline are both researchers by nature. These are people who like doing the homework, and yet they ran into the same walls that most people run into, which is when you want to go beyond the most popular places, Florence, Venice, Rome, the Amalfi Coast, and the Cinque Terre, you have a hard time finding good information. And when you're not looking for a cookie-cutter itinerary or trendy recommendations, it's difficult. They both wanted cultural immersion, meaning, and connection to the soul of Italy. Now, it's very moving to me that they had these experiences in Italy in the first place, and also that they're still listening and following my work. So this episode is a giant thank you to them, but it's also dedicated to you, the person who wants to travel deeper, who looks at travel planning as just the beginning of the experience, and who knows that the best experiences often start with a single heartfelt conversation. Let's dive in.
I spent a lot of time reading about Naples, novels and stuff. So I was worried that I was kind of sad when I was going. You know what I mean? Have you ever experienced that? Because it was such a fun process. And I thought, oh, it's just not going to be as good as that was. And it was better, you know?
Let me just start by saying it's thanks to you that I've developed this trip consultation model, because
Yeah.
you had asked me if I could, just meet you on Zoom. And I was, yeah, I can totally do that. But I never thought of it as a business model. And then after that first Zoom call with you, I was like, oh, okay, if I tighten this up and I offer this, and it's completely thanks to you.
Well, you did such a good job. Even I went back to that first recording you sent me, and then it was super helpful when I started researching the trip. So it was fun to see it also evolve, what you've been doing. It was neat.
First of all, you are an avid trip planner. Tell me what it is that you find so enjoyable, and kind of what's your process when you decide, your family decides you want to take a trip, what happens?
So I think I might have mentioned to you before, we started thinking about going to Italy in the midst of COVID, and my family hasn't been to Italy, so they immediately wanted to go see Florence and Venice and Rome. And I've been to those places a bunch, And I know they're going to be overcrowded. And I was kind of bummed at first, but then I thought, well, what do I know? And so I started trying to learn more and do deep dives. In the process of doing that, not just reading the guidebooks, but also trying to watch movies, read books, try to get into some history. I just found it was really, really fun, to do that. And I liked that was as much, as I said before, that was as much fun for me as it is actually taking the trip. So that's kind of how I got into it. Um, and so that's how I found you, Danielle. Like I was just looking for more information, and I think we first met because I had heard you on a podcast talk about the Cilento Coast, and my wife had wanted to go to the Amalfi Coast, and I read about how crowded it was, so I found you, and then we started talking, and then I think that's kind of how this process started, and that's how I kind of got curious about Naples, and you really helped me kind of explore Naples, which is a very, very big topic and place to explore. Super cool.
And you didn't take that trip to Italy in the end. You wound up going somewhere else?
Yeah, we went to Spain because we were like a lot of people, we had a flight credit from a trip that was canceled because of COVID. And I pulled my family and they want to go to Italy. And I thought I could do it. There was like, one of the windows in COVID. And then Italy shut down again. And so I had to scramble and go to Spain. But I always had this trip in mind. And then recently, as I got more into it, I got a travel credit card and I started to build up miles. And I thought, okay, I had enough of like, let's do it again. And my son's just graduating from high school. And I thought, let's do a family trip. And so I pulled them again and they wanted to go back to Italy. And then I was able to sell them on Naples, which was fantastic, and they were happy about it, which was in the past, I don't think I could have done that. It helped them. My daughter actually spent a semester in Florence, so that helped. But we were able to sell Naples, which is really fun.
Were there hesitations and maybe even your hesitations about Naples before the trip or before even entertaining the idea of going there?
I think the first time around when I first met you, I think I probably had more hesitations. I had very few hesitations about Naples myself, and I thought the family could really enjoy it. I was pretty confident there was too much to do, but I wasn't sure. So I had a little bit of doubt, like, did I pick the right place? Because I thought, like, oh my God, this is their first time to Italy. My daughter had been, but my wife has never been. My son hasn't been. I'm like, initially I planned to go to Rome and Naples because we only had eight to 9 days. But I just realized 3 days in Rome during the Jubilee was just dumb. So I thought, I knew how much there was in Naples. So I thought, let's just go to Naples. And I posed it to the family and they said, okay. And so I'm like, okay. So then it was kind of on me to kind of make the whole thing work. And as you know, because you helped me, like I went through a lot of different phases in planning the trip, but it was so fantastic. So it really worked out. It was a good decision.
So you fell in love with Naples. I mean, it's either it's like you're totally in love with it or you're like, not my, get me out of here. You're in the club. You're in the
I'm
cult.
in the club. Like you, I'm addicted to Naples. I'm addicted to Naples. You know what? My wife and I, the first day, my wife is we met in New York. I think it helps you I think if you like cities, you're going to love Naples.
Yes. If you like New York, you'll like Naples. If you
Yeah.
think New York's overwhelming, don't bother.
Yeah, you're not gonna like it. Or like if other big cities make you nervous, because it is. I think anyone could love Naples, really. I mean, it is a lot, but we were there the first day, and my wife and I both said we were like, oh my God, we have to move here because it was like everything we could want and more. And at the end, we're like, well, we can't. We're not really Neapolitan enough to actually live here, but we just have to visit a lot, which is it speaks to its charm. I mean, it is like. It is so fantastic. There's so much to see, but also the people, I think, the Neapolitans are just the best. Like, and so fascinating. I can't believe that people go to Naples. Well, I don't understand not liking Naples as a person. I don't, but I understand people don't like cities because there are aspects of it, like, as you know, like the traffic is nuts. Like, you educate people about trying to find a rabbit. Like, as long as you look at the car or the Vespa coming your way, they're going to stop, and it's very intuitive. So but that is a thing. And then also, like, half of my family stepped in dog poop because the Neapolitans don't always pick up, so like that is part of the experience. But there's some garbage, but it's like it's not a big deal. Like, it's just part of the city. There's a lot of life going on in Naples, so it's so great.
Yeah, and I kind of like that it's not always so dressed up for tourists too. It's a real place, and you have people of all socioeconomic levels like living within the city center, which is just not the case in Florence. Like very few people even live in the center of Florence anymore. And if they do, it's like maybe they've inherited a home. It's very expensive and it's like a rarefied experience for a local to live in the city center, but not in Naples. Naples, it's normal.
Like I thought when you said mass tourists come to Naples, I had a strategy that okay, I'll go like 1 or 2 days to Naples Underground to walking the Spacca or stuff like that, and then we'll do other things. And the reality is it doesn't work that way in Naples because the city center is the center of the city. It's not like a historic relic. The Centro Historico is not. It's like it's still the beating heart of that city. So you end up going there all the time because the churches are there, the museums are there. Just there's a lot of life there. So it's but that makes it kind of cool, right? It's not like a relic of the past. It still exists and it speaks to that idea that the 2,000-year-old history is like still very much alive, right? Where the Greeks and the Romans settled. So it's just an amazing place.
And so many Italians are finally discovering Naples too. When I was in Naples a few weeks ago and I went to the Ipogeo Cristallini, all the other visitors there were from Turin, where I had actually just come from as a tourist. And I was kind of expecting, their Northern Italians to be kind of like, ugh, as Northern Italians are wont to do in Southern Italy. And they were like, no, it's amazing here. I can't believe I haven't been here before. It's amazing.
It was the same. Because of, I had read about the Ipogee Cristallini, and but your podcast kind of put me over the edge, and I went. Same thing. It was all Italian tourists, and the guides are so sweet. Naples is kind of hot right now in Italy and in Europe, but not with the U.S. Hopefully, it'll never be ruined by tourism because it's so big, but it's really kind of a beautiful situation right now because there's a lot of tourism and they're set up for it, but it's not at all defined by
Yeah.
tourism. You don't feel like a tourist there as much, I think.
No, you don't. Yeah, you get absorbed into the city, and it's because the Neapolitans, they have such a strong local identity, and so they really they do a good job. And I feel like it's a good lesson for everybody in the world. It's like you are welcome here, but you're gonna eat pizza and you're gonna do it our way because we want you to experience because we love our culture and we love our city. We want you to experience things the way we do it. So it's a very warm coercion into doing things their way, which preserves their identity.
I was also thinking that because I read a lot about the city and the history, and I think for the Neapolitan point of view too. In their view, like it's not that they've been discovered again. It's because they've always been the place that people wanted to go to. It's just there's a little blip where because of some issues post World War II with the Camorra and other stuff that they weren't, but that's what they've been for 2,000 years. Like people visit Naples, right? And it's like
Yeah, the Grand Tour, which gives us the word tourism, Naples was one of the most important stops, and of course Pompeii, and perhaps even the driving force of the Grand Tour, and so close to the city. So you said that your family kind of stuck closer to the hotel or the apartment, but it sounds like you went everywhere.
I did. I went everywhere. And some of them went with me. And my wife also went everywhere too. We had two different approaches to the city, which I recommend both of them. My wife went and walked. I don't know how to say it, Danielle. Is it Posilipo or
Posilipo.
Posilipo? She went there, she walked, and that's a great thing because the people are so fantastic and it's endlessly fascinating. There's so much to see. But yeah, my wife walked, my kids kind of hung out a lot at the apartment that I'd read so much, and it was actually almost a problem. I wanted to see everything, and I'm glad I did because it was so fantastic. I mean, I saw some of the best things I've ever seen.
So what's top of the list? What was the best thing you saw?
The best thing I saw were the people of Naples. We were there over Easter, so we were there the day after Easter, which is Pasquetta. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's a
Yeah.
holiday. And my wife said she was downtown by the Centro Historical by one of the famous street food places where we'd been earlier. And the guys who owned it were above it because I guess they lived in that building holding a banner saying, "Thank you, Naples." And you could see there's the faces of the guys who were on the front of the restaurant, a big heart, like, because it was packed on Pasquetta, but all with Neapolitans because they all come from into the city because they want to see it. So those are two of my favorite things. For the sites, I loved a lot of things. I love the Ipogee Cristallina because I think that is amazing. it's hard to describe. I didn't go to Naples Underground because I just didn't have time, but just you are by yourself in this 2,000-year-old tomb. It was just me and my daughter with a flashlight. And I re-listened to the podcast you did about the Medusa. That is like an incredibly important painting. And, it was just me and my daughter in that tomb. We could have stayed for a half an hour, and they have tours, but it is not packed.
Yeah.
And just you feel like you're Indiana Jones in a way. You feel like you're discovering it yourself. And I just don't know where else you get that experience. I also felt the same way. I went to the Lombardy Church, um, and
Sant'Anna dei Lombardi, yeah.
yeah, which is not too far from the center, from Santa Chiara and Jesus Novo. And I kind of had to work to get there, but I go there and this place is incredible. I mean, it has early Michelangelo, like little small sculpture. It's not the most interesting thing, but it's kind of cool to see. But I went into this church and I go in and there's no one there. And they say, "How did you hear about us?" Like they're trying to drum up business. And I walk in to this chapel and it's called the Sistine Chapel of Naples because Giorgio Vasari painted it. And I'm in there and he painted it. He didn't want to take the commission because it was too dark. And it's still dark. They haven't lit it. And I was in there for 20 minutes by myself looking up to this masterpiece. And it's just like, I went to Florence when I was very young and I experienced that in some of the churches there where I was by myself with Donatello's. And it was kind of what got me into this. In Naples, you can have that experience. There's very few places where it's overcrowded.
Tell me about
Yeah.
your experience in Baia.
Well, I wanted to go because I had read early on, even I think the first time I looked in Naples, is that there's this underwater park there, and I'm a scuba diver, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do that. I met our guide there, and we're in this park, which is probably it's pretty good size, right? It was only us and one other group in this entire park. They were an Italian family, and as our guide told us, they were just there because it was of the park. It was just a cheap place to go and hang out outside. They had no interest in the relics, really. So it's just me and my daughter and our guide. And so we had the run of this place, and it's incredible. And so but what you focus your podcast on, the Temple of Mercury, is like it is one of the best things I have ever seen in my life. There's amazing mosaics. What I learned is that this park, when you read about the Grand Tour, this was on the Grand Tour. Baia was always one of the most important places. It's like everybody in the Grand Tour wanted to go to Baia. They wanted to Campo Flegrei to see the fumaroles, and they also wanted to see this stuff too. And what I was told was it's because Pompeii wasn't really discovered until the late 1700s, right? So this was like this is Rome, and it is Rome. And it's like it's different from Pompeii. Pompeii was a regional important center. This was the Hamptons. This is where they all were. And so like it's so cool. I can't and it's if you're someone who wants to kind of discover some things, this is a place you can go and do it.
There's so much written about it by the Roman writers, so it has always been known. Where it's true is like Pompeii wasn't a capital or an important political center, it was just a city, but Baia was one of the power centers. When I was there last, I was with a friend of mine who had to work while she was traveling, and she got a phone call from she works in the financial industry, and so she's there talking away and her voice is echoing through the Temple of Mercury. And at first I was kind of like, oh man, it was a bummer she's got to work. And then I thought, this is how the Romans would have been probably on vacation. They would have been yelling political machinations back and forth at each other.
That is so funny. That is so true.
You also made it to Caserta.
Yeah, made it to Caserta, which was so great. I listened to you did a podcast about it, and then you have a friend who wrote a book called Maria Antoinette's Sister, which I read. It's a good book. It's a nice novel. And then I also there's a Lena Wertmuller, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, movie called Fernandino and I think and Maria. Like it's a very funny movie. So that was super fun because Ferdinand, he is such a great character to get into. Like he's, has this, you see in the movie, he's got, the actor has a giant nose and you think maybe they're exaggerating, but we go into Caserta, you see the portrait of this guy and like, he's got this giant schnoz. It's really great.
His
And
nickname
you're
was
like,
Re Nazone, King Big Nose.
big nose, right? And he like famously liked to pretend he spoke Neapolitan, and he famously liked to pretend he was a fishmonger and sell to the people. So it's like, and Caserta is like, it's amazing. One is like, it is so easy to get to. I mean, the train's a bit of a, it's an hour train ride, but you just, you go from Napoli Centrale, and then you go to the station at Caserta, and you're literally across the street from the palace. I mean, it could not be easier to get to the location. And when I was there, it was packed, because it was Pasquetta. It was the day after Easter, and that's the day that Italians like to go picnicking. So everyone was there to picnic and to go on the grounds, and I was able to get inside because people were less interested in that. But like but that was really fun because like the Neapolitans, the Italians love this place. So when you go there, you're not going to be among other American tourists. You're going to be among Italian tourists probably. And then it's pretty easy to see, I thought. Like, I thought the tour of the royal apartments was really fast. It's not that different from the royal apartments if you've seen Bourbon palaces in Madrid or elsewhere. It's pretty similar, but it's great, and the grounds are great. And it's just a very fun trip. I think it's a very, very neat place.
Yeah. And very unexpected. People have no idea that Naples was a royal city, that this palace is bigger than Versailles. And then it's been the scene of so many movies. It's the Palace of Naboo from Star Wars, Angels and Demons. The Conclave movie was filmed largely at Caserta.
You could I didn't spend a full day there because I had to get back, but you could spend a couple days there if you were into it. And then I thought that now they have electric bikes there, and you can't bike through all the grounds, but the grounds, as you mentioned before, are deceptively large. The Italians really love that place a lot. So you get to be part of that vibe. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons it's actually in such outstanding condition. And not all of it is open. I mean, so there's so much of it that's, they use part of it for school, a military training academy, I believe, still uses this parts of the space, but it never fell into decline, even in years before UNESCO supported it with funds, or before there was really any tourism at all, in like the post-World War II years when everything in the area was still pretty decimated. Local people, like I've heard stories, actually would volunteer to clean it and maintain it and take care of the grounds.
Uh-huh. Well, that Bourbon era is like a great source of pride for the Neapolitans. I thought that was really neat.
And it's funny because if you drive there, you kind of feel like you're driving through like New Jersey, right outside of New York City. There's all of these, like all the marble countertops. There's a lot of furniture showrooms and furniture
Uh-huh.
warehouses nearby. So if you live in Naples and you're ordering marble countertops, they're coming from a warehouse. Like that's right outside of the Royal Palace, which I think is so funny. But again, also in keeping historically, because they were just constantly building and renovating that place. So there were tons of artisans and craftspeople that would have been living immediately around it at all times. So, since this is something that you really enjoy, if you could talk to me a little bit about the process of, you've decided to go somewhere, what's the first, the second, then the third thing that you do?
Well, I mean, I do the initial like Google research, and I try to find people like you who know a lot. And then um, I, I think my personal approach is I have to learn enough to forget about what I know, if you know what I mean. Because like I think you have to come into these places being humble, particularly a place like Naples, because it is so deep. So I think in the end, like you have to take a very simple approach. But for me, I have to kind of get all the stuff out of my head first until I can kind of get a view of it, how to navigate the city. What I do is, I get the guidebooks. I like to get actual guidebooks. I listen to people like yourself. I also like to get books about the places. I know not everybody likes to do what I do, but like I think reading novels about a place is quite helpful because it gets you into the place, right? You get a view of it. Like, and I read, a bunch of great books, and you can also watch movies. I like when I told people I was going to take my family to Naples, still towards the very end, very smart people were like, "Oh my God, Naples." And you're gonna get like not if you're gonna go to Naples, you're gonna get a lot of that, and it's discouraging. You're like, am I making a mistake? Is it going to be terrible for my family? And it's not. I can tell you that with my family, I wanted to let everybody have their own trip, right? I didn't want to try to force them on a march towards the sites. And in a way, I think by actually getting into it and reading a lot about these things and reading a ton that then you've already had that experience in some ways.
That's actually one of the great things about traveling in a city where you can, take a centralized place to stay and people can go off and do their own thing. And then you can always come back together for meals or for certain experiences that you do want to have together. But it's nice that you can just, if somebody wants to go shopping, they don't have to apologize for it. And everybody doesn't have to wait around for them. Same if you want to go to a museum or you want to go to an underground crypt with a flashlight.
Exactly. My son, I got like it's so great now with iPhones, you can like, I gave him a travel credit card. Of course, I had to immediately when he got back take it off of his phone, but he put it on his phone. So like, he bought a suit, like not an expensive suit, an Italian suit, which he loved, and other clothes, and it was so great for me. He was there, he went on his own at one point and found a shirt. He's not he's not a spoiled kid or anything, but it's just he was exploring the city. He was like I was so happy with that. And we had this local pizza place. There's so much good pizza in Naples. You really one thing I have to say is like don't get wound up about I have to go to the special pizza places. You really don't. Like we had this local place. It was so good. It was like the best pizza I've ever had. And the cool thing is my son went back there 4 times on his own.
Well, the genesis of this trip was my mother-in-law's dad immigrated from Calabria in early 1900s, but she had always wanted to go back. And so in 2018, we planned a trip to go to Italy, but she decided she wanted to hit the biggies. She wanted to go to Rome, Florence, Venice. So that's what we did. And then during the pandemic, I had lots of time to read and plan. And so I did lots of research into Calabria and other areas. And then I heard you speak about Cilento. And that really piqued my interest because I love Salerno. And we'd been to Paestum in 2018 and just really fell in love with the region. So I knew we wanted to go spend more time there. So that was the beginning of the trip. And it was really to go get more information on her roots and my husband's roots, but also just to explore Italy because we just all fell in love with it. So
you're a traveler by heart. So you said that you first fell in love with traveling in France, right?
Yes. So I kind of feel like I'm cheating on France when I say I love Italy. But I had studied French in high school, and then my mom and I went after graduation for a month, and that just opened my eyes to the importance of language and culture more so than living in my little suburbia that I'd grown up in. And then in college, I had wanted to study in France because I ended up majoring in it. So I went back and I spent 2 weeks in Italy during spring break. And again, it just feels like home. I don't know how better to explain that, but everybody's just very welcoming. We met some very gracious people, my friends and I, when we were in Italy on that trip. And I knew I would want to go back and explore more. I just love traveling.
But you go deeper. I mean, you're not just planning a vacation. I mean, if I remember correctly, you like to read books about the place that you're going to. I mean, you do a deep dive first.
Yeah. And my lucky children, they get to read books about where we're going too. So I feel like it helps them get invested in the vacation.
How does that go with them?
It goes well because they had read, so the first trip, they were 6 and 9 when we went. And so they read some picture books about David. And then we read some architecture books. I think we read some travel back in time books so they could experience Pompeii and all that. But their favorite things, we did a pizza tour based on a book we'd read, which they absolutely loved, pizza making. And David, they were just in awe, rightfully so, of seeing that statue. I mean, I don't think that they would have appreciated it as much if they hadn't read about it.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. And David is one of those things, and I'll put the Leaning Tower of Pisa in this category, or even the Colosseum, where they're so iconic. So that when you see them, it's, oh, wow, there it is in real life. But of course, the history is so much deeper. And the David, especially, is such an impactful thing to see when you know the story.
It's just beautiful.
So you had been to Paestum in 2018. So you already had an experience of Cilento, but then you heard me speaking about it. Were you happy that you really dug deep into the off the beaten path stuff after having done the more traditional trip?
For sure. I've been to the biggies like 3 times now. So I feel like not that I don't want to go back. I love Rome. I love Florence. I love them all for different reasons, but they're just so crowded and they've become quite commercialized. I went to Cinque Terre in 1997 and I met this Nonna at the train station. We rented a room from her and she was speaking Italian. I could understand her and I was speaking French. It was just amazing to have that experience. You don't get that in these heavily touristed areas anymore. It's just hard. And that's what I really search out on vacations.
The Cinque Terre especially is a bummer now. I feel like, my first trip to Italy was 1997. And I feel like there was all the study abroad kids. It was a couple of times a year when they would all descend on the Cinque Terre. But you didn't have the cruise ships back then. So it was still a place where you could meet a Nonna at the train station and rent a room from her.
Yeah, no, she was fantastic. It definitely struck a chord in me and made me want to go back.
When you started researching the Calabria Cilento trip, how did that go for you? Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to search for resources, what you found, how it went?
It was challenging. I would just reach out to our hosts and ask them for information too.
That's always a good way to. And sometimes even when I'm doing consultations, someone will say, okay, I'm staying in Calabria and I want to do a boat tour. And I'm like, well, I can give you suggestions, but you should honestly ask your Airbnb host if that's where they're staying. I'm like, because that guy's got a cousin and that cousin's going to be super accountable to him and he's going to be there with you. So that is very often one of the better ways to do those hyper local experiences, even for drivers. There are always resources, more professional resources available, but sometimes somebody's cousin is the most reliable guy in Italy. So one of the experiences in particular I wanted to ask you about was Baia. Did I suggest that to you?
Yes, I think I first heard you talk about it, and then I did find some information on National Geographic on Baia as well. So there is that, but not a lot out there. So we hired a guide that you recommended, Francesca.
Yes, Francesca Senescalchi, who she is one of my clutch guides. I've been working with her for like 6 or 7 years. She's amazing.
She was wonderful, and she suggested, in addition to going snorkeling at Baia, we could see a ruin north of there called Kuma, and then explore the bathhouses of Baia before snorkeling. And so she took us on a guided tour of those 2 areas, and then she and her driver left us at the harbor for Baia, where the tour started for the snorkeling. And then we did, I think it was like a 3 or 4 hour snorkeling tours through Subaya, where they take you out to the ruins and you can either scuba dive or snorkel. I'm not licensed for scuba diving, so I'm perfectly happy snorkeling. And you snorkel amongst these recreations of the statues that they unearthed. And these statues are enormous. So you're just floating above this row of statues that lined, I think it was Nero's walkway up to his palace at one point. And then they take you to another area and they uncover these intricate mosaic tiles that were from palaces that are now submerged underneath the Bay of Naples. I love snorkeling for tropical fish, but this was something completely different. And what an amazing way to spend a scorching hot August day.
When you went right after travel opened up again with COVID, people were really, really eager to go to more off the beaten path places because they didn't want to be in big crowds, of course. And it was a real huge boon for all of these amazing worthy places. But I think that's also now retracted, especially last year. Cilento was kind of quiet and Florence, Venice, and Rome were bursting at the seams, and all of our guides and collaborators there were like, I can't take it. The city can't take it anymore. I've been talking about Cilento for 10 years and I've brought so many people there, but it's still a hard sell because not enough people have spoken about it. So can you tell us about your experience in Cilento?
So we love national parks in the United States. We spend a lot of time out in nature, camping and hiking. So when I heard about Cilento being a national park, that got my interest. And then I just really liked the idea of an unadulterated coastline that doesn't have a bunch of resorts. I really liked the idea of getting back to more of a authentic Italian experience. And I loved hearing that Italians go to this region for their vacations. I feel like that sets a nice tone for your trip there.
Yeah.
So I decided to stay in an agriturismo when we were there. I thought it would be a good idea just to connect with the locals and the culture and the food culture, especially.
How did you find the driving?
Easy. So easy.
I saw that you had done Alta, but just the beach area of Pisciotto, right?
Yes. So we, on the way down to Palinuro, we drove through the hill town of Pisciotto, and I loved it. Like, the restaurants just looked very welcoming. There's a little square there, beautiful views out over the ocean for the bay. I think it would be a great place to stay a few days. And then on the way back, we decided to take the coastal route, and we ended up stopping for dinner at sunset in the marina there, and quite a few restaurants down along the marina. And it was lovely.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you got to see both. Yeah, Pisciotto. I just compared Pisciotto to like what Positano was like, not even 50 years ago, like in the 50s. It's this vertical village. Positano was really never much of a town. It was more of like a fishing village where people would literally have like fishing huts. And then because of all the dramatic landscapes and the terraces, which were for cultivating citrus, all these fancy hotels started opening up really in the 50s, which accommodated celebrities at first. But Pisciotto is as if the hotels never happened.
Yeah.
And vertical village, and then the world that's down by the actual sea is like a completely different world. And it's funny because the first time I went there, I just went to the marina, and they were like, "I don't go up to the village. There's nothing up there. Just stay here." And I was like, "All right, I think I'm going to go up to the village anyway." And I'm glad I did. But then when I was up there, they're like, "You got the water down there, but nothing else." And I thought, like, wow, it's amazing. I'm here in Italy, and whatever that was. It was last year, 2024, that people are still saying these things. This is going to sound strange, but like, I feel like I'm in Italy when I'm in a town like Pisciotto.
Yes, 100%. And that's how I felt the entire time I was in Cilento.
So let's also tell me a little bit about Calabria, because Calabria is really the deep dive. I mean, Cilento is real Italy, but it is the place where Italians go on vacation, so there still is a good tourist infrastructure. Calabria has some of that, but not a ton of that. So tell me about your Calabria adventures.
Yeah, so we stayed in Pizzo because it seemed like a central location, and it had a train station that stopped there. So it seemed like it should be easy to get around. What I discovered was I would like to have a car in Calabria, because even to get to the train station from the town, it's quite a distance. But our Airbnb hosts hooked us up with the taxi drivers.
The reason to go to Calabria was roots.
Roots, yes. So my mother-in-law's family is from a little town called Marcellinara. So it's inland from Lamezia Terme. And we hired a guide that you also recommended, Tommaso. So he is a guide at the Archaeology Museum in Reggio Calabria. But then he also does these ancestry research for people that are from Calabria. We sent him everything we knew. He went to the town a couple of times, and this was during still a lot of lockdowns. And so he would go there, and everybody was out sick with COVID, or, So he worked really hard to try and find information for us. And then we ended up there with him while we were on our trip. And my mother-in-law and husband went to the town hall and did some family research, found 2 houses that her family had lived in while they were there. And we got to see those places.
What was the emotional experience for your mother-in-law, for your kids?
It was amazing. So while my mother-in-law and husband were at City Hall with our guide, I had my 2 kids, and then my sister-in-law was with me as well. And we had some gelato, and then they were kind of bored. So we went for a walk around town while we were waiting. And my youngest said, "Hey, Mom, take my picture here, just in front of this random house." He just wanted his picture taken. So I did. And then about 20 minutes later, my husband and mother-in-law come out with the 2 addresses. And we're walking through the town. And the house where my son had wanted his picture taken in front of was one of the 2 houses that they had lived in. I still get chills thinking about it. I don't know how that's possible. My mother-in-law was beside herself. Like, this was just the most touching and amazing experience for her. It was a very emotional day. And I wish we could have stayed longer. People were very curious. We were talking to locals at the church, and she was sharing that her father had come there, and they were trying to talk to each other and see if anybody knew anybody. And it was really, really, well, really sweet.
So what was it like for your kids who are removed from that from a few generations?
Oh, they love it. And they wrote stories about this particular experience for school. It really stuck with them. My youngest was just in awe. That was the house that they grew up in. And they both just really appreciated being there and learning about where their family came from.
I have this, kind of cuckoo theory that our ancestors, they want us to find them. They want us to tell their stories. Your son standing in front of the house, I find that to be somehow natural, that there is some gravitational pull.
Yeah.
Metaphysical or genetic or both. I don't know, but it makes sense to me.
It was pretty out of this world. I'm kind of speechless still when I think about it. I've never really experienced something like that. I felt it was that strong of a connection between a place and a person. But it definitely felt that way that day.
Well, when you think about it, ancestrally, right? My dad at some point decided to do 23andMe, and on both sides of my family, both of my parents from Campania. So I'm like, we're not going to find any surprises. Dad, I'm a historian. I've done as much research as I can do with books. And he was convinced, I don't know, we were going to find out we were like Jewish or from the Middle East or something. And then it came back, it's like, you've been in Campania near Mount Vesuvius for 7 gajillion years. But, when I think about that, I'm like, being here in the United States, like, this is the anomaly. Everything in our genetic makeup is kind of accustomed to that place. So it's interesting to think about going back to these places which are foreign to us, but maybe to our bodies, they're familiar.
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely a pull there for sure. And I don't have any Italian in me, but my husband does. And my mother-in-law, as I've learned Italian and learned about Italy, I understand her so much better. Like, she's Italian through and through.
I've definitely had that experience for myself. And so many of my clients have said that too. They're like, they've gone back to a place and then they're like, oh, I thought my family was just weird in that we did this thing or we have this mannerism or we get upset about this thing. But now I just understand we're Italian. Are there any other stories or anything else that you want to share from your adventures, especially since you're such a diligent and passionate planner?
Yeah, planning could be my middle name, I think. But this is honestly my passion. I love travel and culture. Our boat trip in Palinuro was amazing. We found just a local guide that our agritourismo had recommended, and we called and made a reservation for an afternoon boat trip. And he took us down to blue grottos, and the light coming through just is a bright, bright turquoise that is unfiltered and just beautiful. And we got to jump off some rocks and just swim along the coast, see all the dotted, colorful umbrellas of all the Italians on vacation.
The coastline of Palinuro is spectacular, and I just can't believe how quiet it is. I don't know. I don't know whether to say it's a shame that it's so quiet or whether to just leave it alone because it is paradise and there are very few people there.
Yes, I agree 100%. I feel the same way about Salerno, to be honest with you. Like, it's so close to the crazy of Amalfi, but yet it feels like it's completely separate. Thank you for the recommendation to visit the ivories there and how to see them, because it was a very limited time window, but we were able to go. Those are phenomenal.
Oh, I think you're the only person who's ever taken me up on that suggestion. They're incredible.
They're incredible. And then the crypt underneath the Duomo there in Salerno? I mean,
yeah, the tomb of St. Matthew, for people that are active Christians, the tomb of St. Matthew is a pretty big deal, but just for anybody who wants to go see something beautiful, it is an absolutely spectacular place that it's like entering another world when you go downstairs.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the Duomo is beautiful, but you can tell it was damaged in earthquakes over the years. Some of the mosaics have come off on the certain like pillars or whatever, but
World War II, that's what did it there.
The bombs. The historic core of Salerno is beautiful and medieval and still walking only streets. And I felt like in 2022, it was more touristy than when I was there in 2018. I feel like there's less locals living there and more tourists. So maybe there is a slow shift, but it's still magical.
Yeah, it's still a real place. I mean, Salerno's a really desirable place for Italians to live. I mean, rent-wise, talking about Italian salaries, it's quite expensive. I think it's like the city that boasts the largest amount of sunny days in all of Italy. There's a fast train station there. It's close to Naples, but it's not Naples, so it's a city, but a smaller city. I think for the more thoughtful tourist who wants to settle into a place and walk around and kind of feel like you're part of a city versus just breezing through. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Matt and Caroline as much as I loved speaking with them. And these conversations remind me that the best trips don't start with, getting online and just trying to book stuff. They start with intention and curiosity and desire to connect with a place and a culture. So if that sounds like you, if you don't want the version of Italy that you see on social media, I would love to help you design something richer. So whether you're returning to your roots, you're planning a honeymoon, or you just simply want to create an experience that stays with you long after the flight home, my trip consultations are where that begins. I listen carefully, I guide you with cultural and historical knowledge and insight, and I help you craft a journey that's deeply personal and unforgettable. And you can book a session with me directly at danielleoteri-italy.com, formerly feasttravel.com. If you put in feasttravel.com, you will also arrive at the correct website. I have changed the name of my business to just be my name because it's all me anyway. And just click Trip Consultation in the menu. Italy is not a checklist. It's the most beautiful country on earth, so let's plan something meaningful together.